Before the big democratic revolutions kicked off, the world was honestly running on unfair settings. Regular people were doing the heavy work, paying the taxes, suffering through high food prices, but when it came to decisions, they had basically zero say. Meanwhile, kings and nobles were chilling with power, wealth, and privilege. The Enlightenment thinkers came in like, what if everyone actually had rights? And that flipped the switch for a lot of people. Suddenly, everyone started asking questions like, why can the king control everything? And why do we have no voice? On top of that, the economy was terrible. Bread was expensive, countries were in debt, and taxes made daily life harder and harder. Basically, people were struggling and tired. All these problems came together. Unfair systems, new ideas about freedom, and growing frustration. And they pushed people toward huge democratic revolutions. These revolutions didn't just topple kings. They started changing how people viewed rights, power, and equality. Our goal today is to walk you through what happened, who was involved, why it mattered, and how it still shapes real life today.
Let's start with the revolution that rocked Europe first, the French Revolution. France in the late 1700s was basically a giant pressure cooker ready to explode. Most people belonged to the third estate, which included peasants, urban workers, and the middle class. They paid most of the taxes and struggled to survive, yet they almost had no political power. Meanwhile, King Louis XVI and Queen Mary Antoinette, the nobles, and the clergy lived comfortably, protected by wealth and privilege. The revolution took place in Paris, especially at places like the Bastille, Versailles, and the meeting halls of the National Assembly. These locations mattered because they were political authority and royal power were centered, making them symbols of oppression for the people. Here are some key events that pushed France past a breaking point. Tennis court oath. When members of the Third Estate were locked out of a political meeting, they gathered in a tennis court and promised not to leave until France had a new constitution. This moment showed that ordinary people were willing to challenge royal authority directly. Storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789. Angry citizens stormed the Bastille prison to protest royal power and search for weapons. Even though only a few prisoners were inside, the event became a powerful symbol of rebellion against the tyranny. Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. This document stated that all men were born free and equal and that government power came from the people. It introduced ideas like freedom of speech, equality before the law, and protected of basic rights. Execution of King Louis. The king was executed in 1793, officially ending the absolute monarchy. This shocked Europe and proved that even a king could be held accountable by the people. Reign of Terror. Led by Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, thousands were executed out of fear that enemies would destroy the revolution. This period showed how revolutionary ideals could become extreme when fear and violence took over. Even though the French Revolution became chaotic, it proved that common people could overthrow unfair systems. Its ideas about liberty, equality, and popular sovereignty spread far beyond France. While France was fighting for change in Europe, another revolution happening across the Atlantic, the American Revolution. The American Revolution involved the 13 colonies fighting against Great Britain. Colonists were frustrated by heavy taxes like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, especially because they had no representation in Parliament. On the British side were King George III and Parliament, while the American side included leaders like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and thousands of everyday colonists. This revolution took place across the colonies, especially in cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and important battle sites such as Lexington, Concord, Saratoga, and Yorktown. These locations became centers of protest, political discussion, and military conflict. Here are some major events during the revolution. Boston Massacre. British soldiers fired into a crowd of colonists, killing several people. This event increased anger towards the British rule and was widely used as propaganda to unite colonists. Boston Tea Party. Colonists dumped British tea into Boston Harbor to protest unfair taxes. This act of defiance showed that colonists were no longer willing to obey unjust laws. Lexington and Concord. These battles marked the first shots of the Revolutionary War. They proved that conflict between Britain and the colonies had turned violent. Declaration of Independence, written mainly by Thomas Jefferson. This document argued that people have natural rights like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It formally announced the colonies' break from British rule. Battle of Saratoga. This turning point convinced France to support the colonies, giving them a major advantage in the war. Battle of Yorktown, the final major battle where British forces surrendered effectively, ending the war and securing American independence. The American Revolution showed that a group of colonies could break away from a powerful empire and create a government based on self-rule rights and representation.
So, what happened after all this? Democratic revolutions didn't have a clear ending. Instead, they reshaped how societies work. People stopped accepting the ideas that rulers were above everyone else, and the belief that power should come from the people started to spread and stick. In France, the revolution eventually slowed down after years of violence, and Napoleon took control. Even though France didn't become a stable democracy right away, absolute monarchy was primarily ended, and ideas like legal equality and citizenship remained. In America, the revolution ended in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris, and the colonies officially became the United States. Soon after, a new government was created based on representation, individual rights, and the rule of law.
For ordinary people, life didn't magically become perfect, but a major change did happen. Social classes became less rigid, political participation slowly expanded, and people began to expect a voice in how they were governed. Even groups that were still excluded, like women and enslaved people, gained new argument and inspiration to demand equality in the future. Overall, these revolutions didn't just replace king or win independence. They changed how people thought about government, rights, and their own role in society. From this point on, people believed the fairness and the representation weren't privilege, they were expectation.
Now let's talk about the part where these revolutions actually connect to our lives today. Their impact didn't just stop 200 years ago. Many of the freedoms we use every day come directly from these revolutions. Things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, fair trials, voting rights, and equality under the law all grew out of the ideas people fought for during this time. Anytime you see people speaking up, protesting peacefully, or demanding fair treatment, you are literally watching the legacy of these revolutions in action. These actions are reminders that democracy only works when people are willing to participate and protect their rights. So, what do we actually learn from these revolutions? One major lesson is that leadership truly matters. When leaders become selfish, corrupt, or disconnected from the people, society becomes unstable and conflict grows. On the other hand, strong and fair leadership helps create trust and keeps societies functioning smoothly. They also taught us that rights are not permanent unless they are defended. If people stop paying attention or stop participating, rights can slowly weaken or even disappear without much warning. That's why voting, civic involvement, and staying informed are still important today. Even though modern movements don't look like 1700s revolutions, there are no muskets or guillotines. The same core ideas are still active around the world. People today continue to demand fairness, representation, and accountability from those in power. You can see this in real time in places like Sudan, Mali, and Burkina Faso, where people have protested military governments and pushed for democratic elections. Similar demands appear in Hong Kong, Ukraine, and even in debates within the United States about voting rights and representation. Even though the methods are different, the message remains the same. People want a voice, they want equality, they want governments that serve the public. This is the real legacy of democratic revolutions. They didn't just change history, they continue to shape how people think about power and justice today.